Hi everyone, I'm Steph, and this is a video on how to be an effective ally for Neuro Pride Ireland 2021. Why do I say effective ally? Because there's lots of different ways to be an ally, and some of them are not particularly effective. In fact, some of them can actually be a problem. So this is really about how to do it efficiently, do it well, and do it in a respectful way. And it's specifically directed towards neurodivergent people. So a lot of the time you will get information on being an ally, but it's either very general or it's directed specifically towards issues to do with race and ethnicity or religion or whatever. So this one's a little bit more focused. Being an ally to neurodivergent people. The key things that you could do are to make space for the presence of neurodivergent people, meaning to make sure that there is, that they're not that we're not crowded out of the situation, that there's actually somewhere there for us in the first place. There's no point sort of being an ally in theory from a distance. So it's about bringing us in, making sure that the space for us there and that other people are doing the same. Question their absence. So questioning why we're not present ourselves. It's actually quite important because often people simply haven't thought about it. So if you're saying, can we get some neurodivergent people in here? Why is there nobody here who is neurodivergent? Particularly when there's something like a policy or something that's related to neurodivergent issues that's being discussed or set up or something. Like, we need to be there and be part of that process. Endorse our expertise. This is actually quite important, and you'll see me use the word expert repeatedly through this. I mean, as it happens with any situation, people who live an experience are the experts on living that experience. There will be people who can talk about it theoretically, people who can talk about it from an academic point of view and so on. But at the end of the day, what really matters are how that actually applies into actual lived situations, and nobody knows about that better than somebody who lives it 24 hours a day. So endorsing that kind of lived experience and the expertise that it brings to details of practical solutions, that's really, really important, because often it's people who have PhDs and master's degrees and who are kind of professors of this and have written books on that are the ones who are treated as experts because they have qualifications. Nothing qualifies you really quite so much as knowing how to apply that practically in real lived situations. Challenge invalidation is kind of the other side of that, really. So when somebody kind of dismisses somebody's expertise, dismisses somebody's right to be there, dismisses somebody is even really neurodivergent. Simple things like, well, they don't look autistic. I don't think ADHD is real. Things like that. Those kinds of things, as well as simply saying, well, those people don't know what they're talking about. All of those kinds of invalidations need to be countered. They need to be stopped and countered. And by doing that as somebody who's outside that community, you lend the weight of your own authority or position to the neurodivergent people that you're supporting. Foster trust and friendship. This is, I suppose, one of the problems with being excluded is that you don't get a chance to build up trusting relationships and friendship relationships with people, and it tends to be, your interaction with people tend to be more about trying to argue for your case, trying to persuade people to allow you in the door and things like that. And fostering trust and friendship is part of the process of normalizing having neurodivergent people there. And in actual fact, a lot of the time there are neurodivergent people there. They're just keeping their heads down and not being out about being neurodivergent simply because it's risky. So by generating that sense of trust and the idea that, these are ordinary people and, we can all be friends, it makes it easier for other people to come out and be open and advocate for themselves as much as anything else. This is a kind of an important thing to bear in mind, though, about being an ally. How you go about something is really important. There's this idea called performative allyship, which sounds very fancy. Really what it means is where somebody performs the actions of being an ally, or at least how they envision it, but they're doing it as a performance, so they're doing it for the audience. So to be seen, to be having a kind of a supportive social media banner on their page, or wearing a t-shirt with a slogan on it and things like that, or turning up for a parade or a march or something like that, sharing posts on social media, things like that. There's more to it than just those easy little click and post type forms of allyship. Those things matter. They help to raise visibility, but they're not really doing the job. The job is about, as it says, you have to be willing to lose something. And what you need to be able to do there is basically, look, I'm prepared to take on put in some effort and take on some risk. Because if I do, I'm taking some of the burden off somebody else. I'm using the weight of my own authority or my own position and lending it to somebody else. And there's a risk that somebody might not like me afterwards. But the risk that I'm taking on is vastly less than the risk that somebody would take on if they were having to do this on their own without my support. And that's what being an ally is about. It's about lending support, leveling the playing field, basically. Okay, so here's some things, the actual practical things. I'm going with action words, if you like, in my approach to this. So things you can do. First of all, learn. You can learn about people and not the condition. This is important because often people will know something about ADHD, or they will know something about depression, or they will know something about bipolar or BPD or being autistic or whatever it might be. But they don't really know very much about being that person and living that life. So learn about people, not the condition, because very often what you'll find is that 99% of the time, the people are just like you. They're just experiencing unusual things in their lives. And by focusing on the condition, which is usually framed in all these negative terminology, you're missing out on the crucial thing. Is there's a human being there who's just trying to deal with something difficult, dealing with being invalidated, dealing with being excluded. And they're actually usually really decent, really hard, tough people who working through this on a daily basis. So if you're learning about these people, you're learning about really cool people a lot of the time. Learn from neurodivergent people. And this is about making sure that you get it, from the horse's mouth, as they say. You're getting it, actual lived experiences, not just theory from a book or a website. It's more often the case. Learn from many sources. There are well over 1 billion, probably well over 2 billion neurodivergent people on Earth, and mixed in there are some pretty horrible individuals, because we're all human, but also an awful lot of people who are fabulous, and an awful lot of people are just ordinary people like you and me. And by getting multiple perspectives, you build up a rich picture, and by doing that, you then come to a richer understanding and a more nuanced understanding. There's always going to be somebody out there who's got some ideas that 90% of the people around them just don't agree with. Okay, that's humans. Okay, so find out from 3 people, find out from 5 people, listen to 10 people, just build up your level of knowledge by coming at it from multiple angles. And also, when you're going to learn, do the work and don't expect other people to teach you. So if you don't know, go and find out. There are websites, there are blogs, there are YouTube videos, there's books, there's all sorts of stuff. Most of the stuff you can get without spending any money. It's all pretty much online. But you do the work. You go and find out, answer your own questions. Don't expect somebody to come along and teach you. If something genuinely, it just doesn't make, you can't get your head around it, you've looked at multiple things and you just can't get there, you have a very specific question. If you know somebody who you can ask that question of, ask that very specific question. If they have the spoons to answer, could you tell me something about why this makes sense? That way you're not expecting a generalized answer, and you're not expecting an answer. You're just saying, if you've got the spoons right now, or could you point me towards somewhere that could explain this to me better, because I can't find an explanation that makes sense. Advocate. Take the risks on that other people can't, because for you the risk is lower. It might seem like a bit of a risk to you, but guarantee you it's a far bigger risk for somebody else. And the reason why is, one, because it's hard to get in. Once they've got in, their position is usually vulnerable. So if you're taking that risk, you're laying the groundwork for somebody else, making it easier for them. Amplify neurodivergent voices, because often neurodivergent voices are not present. So if you're taking that voice and bringing it in and using your voice to express what those neurodivergent voices are saying, you're bringing that voice into a place that it can't currently access. Cite neurodivergent sources, similar kind of thing. When somebody's looking for opinions or they're looking for expertise, cite the people who are neurodivergent as your sources. That points other people towards those individuals and flags up that they are experts, and that helps to shift who's regarded as an expert and why. Point to neurodivergent experts. So when people are asking questions, say, go and talk to that person. They know about this. They're an expert on this. And then again, you're talking about shifting the balance of who's regarded as the source of real information. The next action you can take, be present. I already mentioned being present. And this is kind of like working through the details of what that actually means. Use your presence in whatever space it might be to counter disadvantage. Now you can do that by sort of like standing with somebody who is being questioned or invalidated. You can use your presence to, as I said, echo somebody else's voice where it's not being heard. But also be present to query the absence of neurodivergent people. So, if you're there and you're saying, do we have a neurodivergent person who's input into this process? Have you checked with neurodivergent people whether this is appropriate or needed or the right timing, things like that? Again, you're just reminding people, assume that people are actually inherently good and that they want to be inclusive, that they're just making mistakes or they've forgotten. So you're just reminding people. Look at it that way, and don't expect to be going there going to say, like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. If you're taking that approach to it, you're generating a defensive response out of people. So try not to do that. Try and just say, kind of like, have we done this? Has anyone remembered to do so-and-so? How many people who are neurodivergent have been included? You're composing questions in other people's heads and asking them to work out for themselves what the answers are, and often the answers are, oh, forgot. Yeah, we should do that. And you're generating a positive action as a result and not a negative response. Hold a space for neurodivergent people. This is kind of one of the important things that, particularly in an organization, really matters, that you're basically saying, okay, hang on, we need to slow down, we need to stop. and wait for neurodivergent input. Or if a neurodivergent person is trying to be heard, say, hang on, I'm going to make some space here. Everyone be quiet a second, just listen to what's being said. And then stay present as support. So having established yourself as the ally, every time you walk into a space, you remind people. And by staying present, you act as support. And if a neurodivergent person is then making use of that space, if they're then being talked over or being dismissed, you can step back in as support and say, hang on, this person's here for a purpose. Listen. This is an incredibly unpopular idea. Be humble, but it's important because at the end of the day, you may be an ally, but that doesn't make you the superhero. You're not the center of the story. You are not the expert. Okay, you're there to bring the expert to where they should be, which is center stage. If that means you have to step onto center stage to say, we need an expert here, the minute that expert steps on stage, you step aside. Question your assumptions. You are going to make assumptions because you're not that person. And you need to be conscious of that and understand that even though you maybe believe that you're saying the right thing or doing the right thing, that you could be wrong. And keep asking yourself, is this really appropriate right now? Is this what's needed? Should I step aside? Should I double check this? Question yourself all the time, because you're always working with secondhand information, no matter what the circumstance is. And getting that neurodivergent input is really important. Accept corrections as gifts that come at a cost. Very often when people turn around and tell you your assumptions were wrong, you made a mistake, or that you kind of overstepped the mark, it's very easy to become defensive about that. But if you looked at differently as somebody saying, hang on, no, you didn't get that quite right, let me go and take the time at a cost to me of giving you more information and increasing your learning. That's a gift that somebody's giving to you because they trust you. They put in that effort and they believe that it's worthwhile because they think telling you is worthwhile because they think you're trustworthy and a good ally. And that's actually quite a compliment, really, and should be taken as such, really, not as kind of a criticism, but as a compliment. So express your thanks, give your apologies, keep it simple and sweet. Sorry, got that wrong. You're right. Thanks for telling me. And move on. Do better next time. Trust. I mentioned trust again a couple of times. But this is kind of important because one of the problems that neurodivergent people find is that they are not trusted. And this can come in a multitude of different forms. A lot of the time it's kind of invisible and unspoken, and that makes it very difficult to pin down and challenge. So by modeling trust, you can actually help to tip that balance and generate trust in neurodivergent people. Trust the experts and follow their lead. So if a person is an expert in lived experience with a neurodivergent condition, they are the expert, you follow their lead, which shows that you trust them as experts. Not just to them, but to others around you. Work to be trusted by neurodivergent people, because very often our trust is betrayed. Very often we will step out and be visible and be slapped down for it. It's hard to trust in that situation. So if you work hard to be trusted by us, to be trustworthy, you become a valuable ally, because then we can know that we can give you information. We can do that correction, knowing that you'll take it in good faith and actually build on it. For example, we can trust you to carry a message for us into a space that we can't access. That's really important. That's really what we need you to do there. So being trusted by us is really important. Use your advantage to normalize trusting us by being there, by being present, by modeling trust of us, your advantage to get into places we can't. And acting out that role of being an effective ally normalizes the idea of trusting neurodivergent people to other people. So they think, this person's trusting them, maybe I should too. Don't question somebody's disclosure. This is about trusting somebody's honesty. So very often neurodivergent people are faced with things like, well, I don't think ADHD is real. Are you sure you're bipolar? You don't look autistic to me. You know, those are basically saying, I don't think you're telling me the truth. And that's a kind of a polite way of essentially kind of saying, I think you're lying to me. And very often the person has actually been very brave to even talk to you about this, even mention it. And they've done it because they need to, not because they think it's something cool and trendy. There is no advantage to being neurodivergent. There is no neurodivergence that comes with some sort of social advantage. Okay. And if somebody's going to go and step out and actually disclose that they are neurodivergent, they are taking a risk by doing that. And all too often, that risk turns out to have been a bad choice because they end up being dismissed or excluded as a result. So if you're questioning what somebody is disclosing to you in some way, it does nothing to help. It makes things 10 times worse. It reinforces the harm that they're actually experiencing on a daily basis. And by taking what they say on faith and trusting that what they're saying is true, you are helping to counter that. You're helping to restore their sense of faith in humanity, who, you know, unfortunately we're part of this species, but we get betrayed on an ongoing basis, unfortunately, and helping to counter that is something that's really appreciated. Step back, which is an odd thing to say, but it's really important. Don't assume that you're always needed. Okay, just because you think here's a situation that requires some advocacy, don't assume that you have to step in and do it. Check first, watch, see what happens. There could actually be neurodivergent people involved there. They could actually be completely on top of the situation, and you don't necessarily need to come marching in waving a flag. See if it's needed. Ask, am I needed here? What do you want me to do? Don't speak for neurodivergent people. Which, I mean, this is about sort of like going in there and saying sort of like, well, what they want is blah, 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 blah. Your view of that isn't always important. What's more important is to say, I don't think this is fully capturing what neurodivergent people want or need. Go and ask them. That's far more useful than saying, I think what they want is, because unfortunately too often people get it wrong, and then they end up creating situations that we have to undo before we can actually start moving forward again. Yeah, that's cyber. It's hard work. Create the space and step aside. I think that's probably one of the most important parts of being an ally, is to create that opportunity, that kind of piece of space that neurodivergent people can step into and do our own advocacy. So to do that, you need to create the space, push the crowd back. When somebody steps in and they've got the crowd's attention, then you step aside, because your job is done. Your job is not to speak for neurodivergent people. Your job is to enable neurodivergent people to speak for themselves where they can. But be also ready to step back in to support. So this is what I kind of mentioned about being present earlier on. Like be present on the sidelines, so that your presence kind of says, I'm still here. I'm still prepared to stand with this person. I'm not going to leave them on their own. and the one that nobody wants, fail. I mean, this is actively fail. Take on the fact that you're going to fail. This is about that business from the quote at the start about being prepared to lose something. You will get things wrong. You cannot get it right. No neurodivergent person is going to get everything right all the time. You certainly, as an ally, are going to get things wrong. Okay, that's part of it. This is part of the deal. But treat your corrections as learning. Treat it as a learning opportunity. Learning opportunity. Seriously, I mean, it is. I mean, you don't learn anything from getting something right, because all you've done is just confirmed what you already know currently comes across as right. If you get something wrong, it means here's a chance for you to learn something new and enrich what you know. So look on it that way. It's not somebody judging you, it's somebody saying, I trust you to get it right next time, so I'm going to tell you how. And then get back up and keep trying. Because that's what we do on a daily basis, you know. And having somebody else stand up with us, that's really matters. And just to finish up, to drive home a point, listen to lived experiences, listen to many people, listen to experts in neurodivergence, listen to the correction, because listening, not speaking for us, but listening to us, that's how you become a good ally. Thanks for listening. Bye now.